Hey guys, God bless you. It's been a while. Um, I can give you a little background of what's going on. So after I after I finished my last video series, He Will Light My Candle, um, I got to the point of where it talked about the cherubim, and I was looking at Ezekiel 1, Ezekiel 10, Revelation 4, and some of Isaiah about the seraphim, and I didn't know where the Lord was taking me. And I started kind of just putting down some notes, some things I noticed. And I knew from video 8 that um, this is a restoration project that God is doing. And what God is doing, in my opinion, um, is He's restoring everything that Satan has taken away. And I know the word tells us this. In fact, the cover photo for this video states that in Joel. And but I didn't see it for really what it was. And what it is God is restoring us back to our original state, and everything's going to be replaced, including the position that Satan held. Now, who's that going to be and what's that all about? I don't know for sure. The Lord took me on like a tangent that I really can't explain, and in the middle of it, I was under a huge attack, and I just recently came back to it, and information again is flowing. So all I can tell you is this is probably going to be a very long video, long series, but I'm just kind of letting him go with it, and I can't really explain much more than that. What started off as trying to define the faces of the cherubim and what that meant and what all this meant started off to go off into another direction to the seraphim and what they are, and then it goes from there to the tribe of Dan. And I know a friend of mine, D. Olivari, and I'll post her link below. She just did a video on Dan, so and we hadn't even talked. So I was like, well, what is he showing you? And so it's been very strange. Like the Lord has taken us on the same direction, but a different parallel for each of us. I really can't explain it, but anyway, guys, this is the information He's given me, and I'm just going to put it out and pray over it, of course, and I hope you learn something. I hope you enjoy it. Um, so let me get down here. So I started looking at these verses like I just stated. The faces of the man, face of an ox, face of an eagle, and then in Revelation, um, you have all four faces here. Each one had this likeness, and then you see the same thing in Ezekiel 10, similar, and then Revelation 4, you see each one of them as a lion, each one of them as a calf, and etc. So I was like, what? So I just started taking notes. So don't get too bent up here on what I'm trying to say, but I was looking at the differences. We have a man, and then Ezekiel 10, we have a cherub, and then a man, an ox, and an eagle. The ox is missing, but the cherub took the place of the ox. So I was just kind of looking at some of these things. One set in Revelation 4 has 6 wings. They have 4 wings in Ezekiel 10 and 1. And so these are the differences I noticed. I started writing down, or typing really, um, just some things that I noticed. Jesus' throne is mobile. We see that in Psalms 18, where he descends. 2 Samuel, which is a repeat of Psalms 18, essentially. Um, uh, so John has an angel that's with him. So these beasts are different from an angel because they're called beasts. So what is John really seeing? So I'm just kind of taking these notes. And I got to Seraphim. And when I got to Seraphim, I knew that Satan was both a cherubim, the Bible tells us that, and some say a seraphim. So I was like, well, what's a seraphim? Here we have the 6 wing reference, and we have this verse, and the Bible does not tell us much about seraphim. So how can you be a seraphim and a cherubim? How does that work? If they had 6 wings in heaven, 4 wings on earth, what are we seeing here? What what are we looking at? And we see that here, and when the king died, the Lord sitting high upon the throne. Above it were the seraphims, each had 6 wings, and this is what Isaiah is seeing after this death of this king. Now, some say, the Bible doesn't tell us this, but some say that Isaiah probably thought very highly of this king, and probably not worshipped him in a sense, but probably had him in higher regard than God, which is not right. And when this king died, then God appeared to him on this throne, and we'll see here that he's cleansed. Okay, but let's take a look here at the concordance. Cherubim, cherub, imaginary figure, cherub, plural, cherubim. Seraphim, kind of an interesting definition here. We have burning, poisonous, serpent, specifically a seraph or a symbolic creature, copper in color, fiery serpent, seraph. Okay, and here's all the scripture references. So I don't know where this came from, but the Lord immediately kind of told me that vein sounds and looks like venom. And the vein is depicted as blue in your body, and the arteries carry the red blood. And I started thinking about blue bloods. So I'm like, where is this going? Okay, so a vein is blue and it lacks oxygen. Oxygen is no life. We know that breath of life went into Adam. So oxygen, okay, God put oxygen, the breath of life, into Adam. So, okay, vein, venom, poison, blue, depleted, started coming to my mind. So I was kind of surprised to find out that these were tied to fiery serpents. But as I began to unroll, and I apologize right now, guys, if this kind of bounces around, it's just how it was given, and I was just typing as fast as I kind of could. So let's continue. So I was surprised, but as I began to unroll the text and the content, it made much more sense. So the seraphim are tied to healing. And we know that because, and I don't have a verse here, do I? We know that one of these seraphim takes a coal and puts it on Isaiah's lips to cleanse and purge the sin from his mouth. So these are a cleansing agent of God. These are healers of God. These are cleaners, if you will, of God. So then there are fallen seraphim, fiery serpents. But as I begin to unroll, the seraphim are tied to healing. The fallen versions of seraphim are tied to death, or venom, or poison, or back up here, depleted, lacking life, or taking life. So, and then I thought of this story here in Numbers, and they journeyed from Hor by the way of the Red Sea to the compass of the land of Edom, which is the land of red. And the solo people was much more discouraged because of the way. All right, so they're kind of upset. They want to go to this promised land. They're losing their faith, and they spoke against God and Moses. Why'd you bring us out of Egypt to die here in the wilderness? So they were losing their faith. They were being tested, and God was about ready to have enough of them. For there's no bread, there's no water, there's no soul. Our soul loath at this bread. So the Lord sent these fiery serpents among the people, and they bit them, okay? And much of Israel died. Now, it goes on. Therefore, the people came to Moses. We've sinned. Okay, they repented. Pray unto God that you take the serpents away from us. And Moses prayed on behalf of the people. And the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole. And when it comes to pass that everyone that is bitten will look upon it and live. So Moses made a serpent of brass and put it on a pole, and it came to pass that anyone who looked at it would live. And it talks here in Deuteronomy, who led you through the great, terrible wilderness, where ran the fiery serpents and scorpions. There is no water, and brought you out. Okay, here's the Isaiah verse. Okay, so we have these where you look upon them, you'll be healed. Okay, but they seem like they're an evil version of the seraphim here. But we had go back to Isaiah, we have the version that are with the Lord. And he's like, woe is me, for I'm undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, which this, I think he was giving praise to that king. On any note, he had unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of the people with unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the Lord, all right, seen the King, the Lord of hosts. So something tells me he now recognizes, well, God is real, and here he is in front of me. So one of the seraphim said unto him, having a live coal in his hand, lay it upon his mouth, and touch thy lips, and take thine iniquity away, and your sin is purged. So what I'm seeing here is these seraphim are used to purge sin, spiritually heal. Isaiah had to have a mouth purged before he could speak the Lord's words. The Israelites were made to look upon the serpent on the cross so that they could have a reminder of their affliction. All right, the Lord uses the enemy to remind the people of just who the enemy is. The Israelites were bitten, okay, who the enemy is. They just left Egypt, okay. They know who the enemy is. They saw what God did to them in Egypt. And now they need a reminder, a purging, if you will, a burning, if you will, to remind them that, hey, I'm trying to get you out of here. The Israelites were bitten and healed. They had to look upon the brass staff. I know for me, sometimes I get angry with God for allowing the enemy to do what he does. And I need to be reminded that the one to blame is the enemy and not God. And it's hard at times. Deeper than that, the Lord was reminding them that he had delivered them out of Egypt and made them stare at the brass serpent to live, reminding them that the bondage that they were in from the blue bloods, which we'll get to here in a minute, which the serpent's seed, the seed of Egypt. Okay, so what we have is the placenta here and the umbilical cord. Notice the blue tightly wrapped around the umbilical cord. This is the blue bloods. This is the oxygen depleted blood, the blood without the life, choking the life-giving blood supply to the child. That is part of the problem. And we see that same thing depicted here of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, where Adam and Eve were taking the fruit that they were not supposed to eat. And this is the same thing, choking the life out of the infant, out of the people, out of God's people. So what we have here, let's keep going. All right, so oxygen or the breath of life is in the artery. Okay, and the vein carries the oxygen depleted blood. See, what God did with this is Satan has corrupted everything in this world. He's even corrupted the Bible. And I say that because how many different versions of the Bible is there? Okay, how people have been led astray. But what God did is he put the truth in our own bodies, the kingdom within. And we can take our own bodies, and there's a guy named Enter the Stars that does this very well. And he shows the truth in our own bodies. And I'll give you an example here in a little bit, maybe here if we have time, with the eye. But here's just one example with the umbilical cord, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, okay, to what we are born into, the flesh, all right? And this is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the stump. All right, we're going to get to that here in a second. So arteries comes from arteria, meaning windpipe, all right, which is another word for spirit, wind, okay, which goes into our blood, which goes into we have the breath of life, okay? It carries oxygenated blood. Vein, all right, comes from vena, blood vessel, water course, all right, and it's lacking oxygen. And also you have vein. What about vain as in, what did Satan fall for? Pride, right? He wanted to ascend higher than God, which is vanity, vain. The placenta, I always thought initially was the tree of life. It's not. It is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay? I thought it was the tree of life before. We chose this way. We wanted knowledge over life. And this is the tree that we are born under, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's why you have this intermingled, this vanity, this vain, this pride, this blue blood, this oxygen depleted blood. When you cut the cord of a baby, it's sometimes called a stump, the child being cut off from the tree into the world in the flesh. So if you think of this as stump, okay, and you think of this as a tree, then a lot of things in the Bible will start to make sense. Where it talks about the tree in Daniel 4, it talks about the beam of wood in your own eye. Take out the beam in your own eye before you talk, excuse me, talk about your brother, or show his sin, or whatever the verse I'm talking about. So fruit, tree, roots, branches, all these things should start to have meaning now at this point. This should open up a lot of things in the Bible and make it a lot clearer. The Bible speaks of giant trees, which have always been a mystery. The placenta in Wikipedia is explained as a conduit between the mother and the baby. A conduit is a natural passageway. It is used to pass materials and also information. Let's get back to stump, where some key verses that point to Satan's stump. The word gives us some very unique information on the stump. Okay, like I talked about just a minute ago, Daniel 4. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached into heaven. Okay, if we take this verbatim, this should be a huge tree, right? And the sight thereof to all the end of the earth. It's huge. The leaves were fair, and the fruit there much, and there was meat for all, and the beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of heaven dwelt in the burrows thereof, and all flesh was fed under it, or of it. All flesh, not spirit, all flesh. Flesh is sin, flesh is death, flesh is a shell, flesh is death, okay, was fed. Are we supposed to feed the flesh? No. I saw visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and the Holy One came down from heaven, and I cry out loud, and he cut down the tree, cut off its branches, shook off its leaves, and scattered the fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls in the branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of the roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass. Iron and clay is a mixture that we see in Daniel. Iron is also depicted as Satan's seed, and brass, fiery serpents. In the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, let its portion be the feast of the earth. So we have this huge tree. And then here we have Devil's Tower. If you go and visit places like this, they will not let you take samples of the dirt. You can't take anything with you when you leave. And part of that, okay, their reasoning is to keep it from being taken, just like you don't want to take pictures of a castle because the flash will destroy the paintings insides eventually. However, I bet that this is petrified wood and not a megalith, which they talk about. So we have these large tree trunks, stumps still in the earth. What does all this mean? These are the conduits to heaven. They were cut off, taken. Just like Jesus said, I will cut them off and throw them into the fire. And here they try to explain how these things come into being from lava underneath the earth, essentially. It has a hole and it sprouts up. It's a lie. These were conduits to heaven, probably fallen watchers. Some people ask, how is this all possible? Well, how does this work? Or I think what happens is you're represented by a tree on Earth. And the information that these fallen gave was bad information. It was bad, just like this up here. It fed the flesh. It was bad information. They took it and ate from it. Now God cut them out. No longer going to be a part of it. Thrown into the fire. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery serpent. Cockatrice is synonymous with basilisk, which is the shining serpent. Power to cause death with a single glance. Do you think God was telling the Israelites to look upon the brazen serpent as overcomers? Is that a type of overcoming? Overcome. We are known as overcomers. Look upon the snake, look upon the serpent made of brass on the pole. Make a fiery serpent set upon a pole, and it shall come to pass, if you look upon it, you will live. Overcome. What is the rod that comes out of the serpent's root that produces fiery serpents and cockatrice? The Hebrew word is shebet. Unused, probably branch, a stick, punishing, writing, rod, ruling, fighting. What this is this is what God uses to punish the wicked, a rod. Okay, now we'll get to that here in a second about the Assyrian, the rod of his anger. Okay, but the word rod is shebet in Hebrew. A rod, staff, branch, offshoot, club, scepter, tribe. Okay. Here's another little reference, the rod in the womb. He shall come forth with a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. O Assyrian, the rod of my anger. What God is doing is using the rod of the Assyrian. He's using, this is essentially the Antichrist, okay? The rod of his anger. The staff in my hand for my indignation, okay? God doesn't come out and punish us. He uses things to punish us. And that's exactly what this is. I will send him against a hypocritical nation, okay? Against the people of my wrath, I will give him a charge. So what he's going to do is he's going to use this rod, this Assyrian, okay, and we'll see this later, to punish, all right? It's of his indignation. And I will send him against the hypocritical nation. Here's another reference to the tree of knowledge and good and evil. Like I said, this bounces around a little bit, and I apologize. But this is the knowledge of good and evil. Right here, where this circle is where the pyramids are located at the stump, okay, where it would be cut off. You also have bitter water, right, the bitter lakes. Into the tree of knowledge and good and evil. Okay. We're going to talk about the horse, American Pharoah, the one that won all the Kentucky Derbies. The American Pharoah is a bay colt with a faint star on his forehead. What else goes on the forehead? The mark of the beast, okay? A bay colt, well, in here it talks about the bay tree, which is wicked. I have seen the wicked in great power, spreading himself like a giant green bay tree, or I'm sorry, green bay tree. Same thing. Same thing back then, same thing today. Okay, so it appears that the Lord took me on a tangent compared to what I was prepared to discuss. Going back to the Seraphim, I want to highlight a few things. What we saw with Isaiah was a fiery purification process. It's also the same with the Israelites, albeit a bit different. God uses both the good and evil, all right, and in this case with the Israelites, in order to accomplish his purpose. Isaiah realized he was a sinner, had unclean lips. And then, like I told you before, some say he looked at Isaiah as his savior and probably praised him, although the Bible doesn't give us indication. Um, it was after his death that Isaiah sees Uzziah's throne descend. In short, Isaiah realizes he has sinned, and the Lord directs Seraphim to purge his lips with a fiery coal. This gives Isaiah a commission. I'm sorry, then he gives Isaiah a commission to speak the word of the Lord. In the case of the Israelites, they had to first-hand witness God's divine power on several occasions, and yet they allowed Satan to enter their minds and overpower them, complaining against the Lord. The seraphim are not directly discussed in the Bible. However, we now see evidence of them where we did not before. In a spiritual sense, they are used to purge us of our sins that we carry. It's a spiritual healing process, and at times it's not very pleasant. Have you ever had a son or a dog or something that's been out in the mud or been sprayed by a skunk? The cleaning process of that is not fun. It is not easy, and it can be painful even. Um, and we know that through the purging fires. Your trial of fire or your trial of your faith is more precious than gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Lord Jesus Christ. Behold, I've refined you, but not with silver, but I've chosen the furnace of affliction. Um, and then we have, of course, the refiner's fire of Malachi. Um, Fuller's soap. So it's another reference to cleansing, cleaning agents, cleansing agents. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. Um, Behold, I've created the smith. Okay, this is like a foundry, the foundry worker. He bloweth the coals in the fire and bringeth forth an instrument for his work. So God is making you an instrument for his work. Um, the smith, and here we have the tongs, both work at the coals and fashion it with hammers. Um, so once again, another reference to the smith, the foundry, the refiner's fire. Here in our physical, we have our flesh bodies, and Satan's healing process is anything but pleasant. His promise in the Garden of Eden is that we would be like gods. What does he use? He uses technology to for us to gain some sort of a godlike power. We are less healthy, dumbed down, social experiment in his wacky laboratory, essentially. A friend of mine once said that Satan is like a mad scientist. He is, but he cannot touch your spirit. He can only affect your flesh. He only has the power over the flesh, and even then it's regulated and overseen by God. I'll give you an example of an almost every person has an ailment. Okay, I know myself, I take different medications, um, injections, different things. It's funny how the healing process in the world is anything but a healing process. You might get a little bit better, but then there's always the side effects. There's always the problems. There's always the if you take this medication, and you see it on TV. So if you have this, take this medication, but let your doctor know if you have blah 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 blah. If you have this, blah 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 blah, and you immediately call your doctor if you experience this. I mean, so it's one medication that leads to maybe a little fix, but then you have other things go wrong with you at this point. So there's no medication that fixes any one thing. Okay, it's a vicious cycle. It's depressing. It doesn't get you any better. Um, you know, I've debated on throwing a video on here about chemotherapy. It's got a 40% effective rate. I mean, it keeps you dead. It keeps you sick. So that's his way of perpetuating, keeping you into the world, keeping you into the system. Uh, um, so how does this tie into everything? Well, what I'm going to show you is this doesn't mean all pharmacists are going to hell or this is a bad thing, but pharmakias, all right, in the Greek is essentially a pharmacist, poisoner, sorcery. Um, no, this doesn't mean all pharmacists are going to hell or that it's an evil thing. Um, I'll even give you an example. When I first found the Lord, I stepped out on faith and I said, you know what, I'm not taking my medications ever again. Well, I made a bad decision, and I told the Lord I was stepping out on faith, and for some reason it didn't work. It's just the way it is. I don't know. He'll tell me someday, and we'll move on. But um, it's a perpetual cycle to keep you into the system. Okay. Um, let's see here. Satan's plan is to keep you embedded in the world and to focus on your flesh, your ailments, your problems, not the spirit, which is eternal. Satan's lies orchestrated that they will fall. Um, and this is right now, we're in a Babylonian system, and the Babylon's going to fall. The Babylonian system's going to fall. And when it falls, there'll be another system, but it's going to be a fear based system. It's not going to be a keep you in the world system. It's going to be, I'm going to scare you to death so you stay in the world system. So, anyway, we have this fiery serpent and we have this rod. And of course, we see him, on our medical, uniforms and patches and whatnot. Um, and this is associated with healing and medicine. This is the false seraphim. And if Satan is actually a false seraphim, this makes sense, that he would have this kind of ritual of keeping you into um, essentially an eternal state, as you see, or perpetual state of never being healed. You're not going to be healed. And that's why you see Hollywood actresses and actors. I mean, they're such great shape and everyone's so beautiful. And, he doesn't have to worry about them. He doesn't have to focus on them. So he can let them go, and he focuses on the people of God or the people that will be of God. He knows. I thought this was interesting. The protector of shepherds, gamblers, liars, and thieves. All right, what we're going to discuss now is the throne of God. And there are 4 positions around this throne. We talked about them a little bit in Revelation 4. Okay. You have to the east. Now, this is the direction the Lord's throne faces, to the east, not to the north, to the east. And what you have to the east, you have the Archangel Gabriel. To the south or to the Lord's right, you have Michael. To the rear or the west, you have Raphael. And to the north, you have Uriel. Now, this was, I believe, Lucifer's position. Here's just some key points. Saints will be allowed the wings of a great eagle. Dan is not mentioned in Revelation 7, and it's the tribe here. And it was the tribe of idolatry. Now, what Dee did in her video is she goes through each one of these. You have the eagle, the lion, the man, and the ox. And if we were to take a look at the tribes, and we will hear in a second, they will be overlaid on earth as it is in heaven. Let's take a look. So what I'm trying to say is, in heaven, would this be how God has his throne laid out? I think it is. And then on earth, and this does mirror, okay, so this is north direction, mirror here, as in the, excuse me here, I'm trying to think, the people of God. Is this how we would be arrayed in heaven? Now we know Dan is missing in Revelation 7. It is no longer there. All right, we're going to get into that here in a while. You're going to hear so much about this tribe. But anyway, and to the east, okay, you have these tribes to the to the south, and then also over here to the west. So when we look at this, and then she throws in all the elements too: water, air, fire with Michael, the tribe, and then the books of the Bible describing Jesus John describes him as the Son of God. Matthew describes him as royalty, okay, the King of Kings. And you have Luke, which is the son of brotherly love, son of man, brotherly sympathy. And then over here, Mark, the lowly servant. And what has happened is this position has fallen. This tribe has definitely fallen. And I believe this was Satan's position to the north. And you're going to hear a lot of references about the north here in a minute. So, what I want you to think about is if this is a restoration project from God, from the top down, this would have to be refilled. And who's going to be refilling it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think there's something about this man child that keeps coming to mind. It's been on my mind a lot, this man child. Now, a lot of people will say Jesus Christ is the man child. Okay, I could definitely agree with that. But does it go deeper? Is there more to it than that? Are the 144 replacements for some of this? I don't know. But this is what we're going to talk about. And this is, I've just taken it very slow and very methodically. And I think we can definitely draw some conclusions. So let's take a look. If we need to, we can resort back to here. This is what I thought was interesting. Uriel means God is light. What was Satan? The light bringer. Okay. So there's just some interesting things here going on. Okay. Is this a temporary thing with him here? I don't know. But let's take a look at some stuff. I think you'll find it interesting. So we have the angels that are there. God is light, light of El. All right, which is interesting. Who is like God? Michael, Raphael, the healer. Okay. Gabriel, who knows mostly the messenger, man of God, God's guy, which I thought was interesting. Also, we had Lucifer, the light bringer. All right, so did he take his place? Okay, is it temporary? Is it permanent? I don't know. But there are some strange things going on. So in the north, when you look in the Bible, there's some interesting verses. Okay, we cannot just deny strange things are going on at the north end of the throne. Can we not? This immediately stood out to me and beckoned a bunch of verses back to my memory. Theory only, but did Satan once have the north end of the throne? Is it Uriel, whose name means God is light, his replacement? Could Uriel's position be temporary and be replaced with the man-child? Some of the questions I have, okay? I don't know for sure. Let's look at the north. To hide, to cover, to reserve, to deny, to protect, hidden, lurk, properly hidden, dark, used only from the north as in quarter, gloomy, unknown. Okay, those are the words that go back to north. And the word of God came unto me a second time, saying, What seest thou? And I said, I see a seething pot, and the face thereof was towards the north. The Lord said to me, Out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. He stretches out the north over an empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. This is Satan stating this. And he put forth the form of a hand and took me by the lock of my head and lifted me up between the earth and heaven and brought me to the visions of God Jerusalem, the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, where there was a seat of the image of jealousy, which provoked to jealousy. Now, very, very, very important verse here, okay? The door of the inner gate that looked toward the north, where was the seat and image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. Both Dan and Satan are tied to jealousy. Jealousy because they aren't the number one guy, essentially, to make it plain. Then he said unto me, Son of man, lift up thine eyes and look toward the north. So I lifted up my eyes to way toward the north, and behold, northward at the gate, the altar of this image of jealousy in the entry. Very important verse. Very important verse. Jealousy. Dan and Satan were both jealous. Both jealous. We're going to stop there and I'll continue with this in the next video. God bless you all.